Coming in at number 10, we have Atlantis. Whether or not Atlantis is real, we just don't know. It's a legendary city that is mentioned in a number of pieces of Greek literature, including by the late great philosopher Plato. It is said that Atlantis was a thriving city filled with affluence and positivity. That was until it sank. Atlantis was said to have sunk into the sea in a single day and night. There has been a lot of speculation as to where the city may be. Many think it may be in the Strait of Gibraltar between Africa and Spain. If Atlantis was real, it would be over 11,000 years old. Did the people sink and drown? We don't know. Coming in at number 9, we have the Mayans. The Mayans were an ancient civilization developed by the Maya people. The population lived in southeast Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, parts of Honduras, and El Salvador. Mayan structures still remain, including Mexico's famous Chichen Itza. The Mayan era began somewhere around 2000 BCE and lasted until around the 8th or 9th century AD. There were 19 million people in the civilization, which was a significant proportion of the world population at the time. Now, we don't know the real reason for the extinction. The most sensible theories include drought caused by overlogging, but there are wilder theories out there. Some think that overfarming meant eventually people starved, others say that Mayan rulers killed each other in wars, and others think disease was the main culprit. However, there are some pretty juicy articles out there that suggest the Mayans had contact with aliens, and somehow extraterrestrials were their undoing. Sure. A lot of people also think that the answer lies in the blue hole of Belize, an underwater cave yet to be fully explored. I love me an underwater cave. Coming in at number 8, we have the lost people of Easter Island. The Rapa Nui of Easter Island were the ancient islanders who built the stone figures you have likely seen in pictures. How they managed to build these busts using their limited resources, we just don't know. But how they died out is even more mysterious and makes up talking points in Jared Diamond's best-selling book, Collapse. Easter Island is a small patch of land, roughly 63 square miles in size, and it once had a thriving population. When Captain James Cook found them in the 1700s though, they were on the cusp of extinction. The main theory is that they destroyed the island's ecosystem by cutting down too many trees. Another theory is rats. Rats may have infested the island and destroyed crops. Others say disease wiped them out. Coming in at number 7, we have the Aztecs. In 1545, the Aztec Empire of Central America began to fall when 90% of its population died of mysterious diseases. It seems that up to 17 million people died in the Aztec Empire, which was a massively significant proportion of the Earth's population back then. In Aztec records, they simply referred to the downturn in fortune as cocolitzí, or pestilence. From accounts at the time, people got a fever, blotchy skin, they started vomiting and bleeding out of their eyes and nose. Horrendous. What this mystery illness was had a lot of historians scratching their heads, but in 2018, a new study concluded that it actually may have been a widespreading of salmonella. Salmonella, of course, is severe food poisoning, and if it's untreated, it can lead to death. It is possible that Spanish invaders introduced salmonella to ancient-day Mexico when they brought in livestock from Europe. Coming in at number 6, we have the Indus Valley civilization. The Indus Valley civilization was a Bronze Age civilization in the northwest regions of West Asia. It seems they lived between 3300 BCE and 1300 BCE, and they were one of the 4 civilizations of the Old World. Now sadly, it seems that the civilization died out abruptly. Very abruptly, which has raised a few historic eyebrows. There are a number of theories in circulation, and they include land drying and desert encroaching on farmland. Others think flooding destroyed the land and brought about disease in its wake, but then on the flip side, some people think that changing river patterns led to drought. Others think they died in wars. They were thought to be a very peaceful civilization, not equipped for fighting. Others say that some survived and simply dissipated. We just don't know. Coming into number 5, we have the lost souls of the North Sea. In 2018, evidence of a lost human civilization was discovered under the North and Baltic Seas. It seems that the settlement discovered by archaeologists is being dubbed the Swedish Atlantis, and it could define a whole era of human development that we just don't know about. Right now, a team of geologists, archaeologists, and anthropologists on board a ship are excavating a sandbank on the North Sea floor, measuring about 30 kilometers. What may have happened to the people who lived there, We simply don't know. Another massive mystery at number 4, we have the lost colony of Roanoke. What happened to the Roanoke is a complete and utter mystery. In 1585, a small group of settlers made Roanoke Island off the coast of North Carolina their home, although many left when they found the conditions to be unsatisfactory. In 1587, 2 years later, 115 English settlers came to join those who were left, but weirdly, they found that no one was there. They didn't seem too disturbed by it though, they thought they just, went away. At the time, the colony decided to send their governor, John White, back to England to gather fresh supplies and fresh settlers to expand the colony. Now, when he returned back to the colony where his wife and daughter were, I may add, 3 years later, he found no trace of the inhabitants. Now, this is the second time that this had happened. The only clue he found was the word Croatan written on a wooden post. Croatan? How strange. Where did the settlers of the Roanoke go? They were never ever seen again. Now, some theorists say that they were killed by a Native American tribe, although the fact that there was no trace of their bodies is very suspicious. There was no trace of a fray either. Others say they decided to sail back to England for some reason or another and they got lost at sea, although why would they not leave a message letting their returned governor know? I just don't know. It's very deeply unsettling that this happened twice. Were they simply abducted? Did they just vanish into thin air? Was it a time portal? Coming in at number 3, we have Under the Ice. Some theorists believe that there is an ancient civilization trapped under the thick ice of Antarctica, and it may well be the case. Antarctica didn't always used to be frozen. Now, the deep freeze started happening around 23 million years ago. 160 million years ago, it separated from Africa, and back then it was by and large a pretty hospitable place to live. We know that the first humans as we know them came from Africa, but what if before that they were living in the area of land that used to be connected to Africa and then became Antarctica, but we'll never know about them because they're buried under ice. It's a theory for sure. Now, some people think that they have spotted man-made structures under melting ice in Antarctica, which may be the evidence that theorists have been looking for. Coming in at number 2, we have the Martians. It has long been suspected that there was once life on Mars. While all of the scientific evidence we currently have seems to refute that, some people are convinced that the now very, very cold planet was once able to house life. They think that the Viking spacecrafts and the former Mars rovers Spirit and Opportunity even captured it on film. In 1976, Viking took one of the infamous pictures of Mars, the face on Mars photograph. In 2007, Spirit photographed a so-called Martian rock statue, adding to the list of so-called other statued sightings on the red planet. One of the last images pinged back from the now sadly shut down Opportunity rover appeared to show a bottle buried in the rocks. A lot of people think that Mars was once just like Earth, but suffered some kind of cosmic catastrophe. Many people believe that when the Mars 2030 astronaut mission takes place, we will find clues that will help us understand our own place in the universe. Finally, coming in at number 1, one of my favorites, we have the lizard people and the Silurian hypothesis. A mind bender here for sure. The Silurian hypothesis asks the question, what if humans weren't the first civilization on Earth? Now, researchers from the University of Rochester alongside NASA have produced a paper that details how we might be able to tell if humans were the first civilization to arise. Basically, some people think that humans might not have been the first rulers of Earth. Now, if you're thinking the name Silurian sounds familiar, it is taken from Doctor Who. It's a mythical reptilian race who were on Earth before humans, but they went into hibernation only to pop up again millions of years later. This also sounds a lot like Scientology, and you know what? Maybe Tom Cruise was right. Now, NASA strongly doubts that there was an industrial civilization before ours, because we would be able to note it in geological records. However, the Earth's crust is pretty thick, so perhaps all of the rocks and glaciers that we've studied are only telling part of his story. Perhaps even deeper down, there are scary mysteries waiting to be unraveled.
Starting off this countdown, we have Easter Island. Easter Island is a volcanic island located in Polynesia. It's probably best known for its huge statues that are found all over the island. These statues are called moai, and there are said to be more than 900 on the island. In fact, the inhabitants on this island were considered incredibly sophisticated. I mean, those statues are made from solidified volcanic ash, and they're said to take up to a year to make for just one. So how did they manage to build hundreds of them? We don't know. Now, research suggests that their methods of living weren't sustainable, so it's estimated that they settled on the island between 700 to 1200 AD. At its peak, the island held 12,000 people, but eventually they used up all of the island's resources and had to move on. That led to the loss of the island inhabitants and their society. Coming in at number 9, we have Çatalhöyük. I'm so sorry if I pronounced that wrong. This is considered one of the first urban settlements in the world. And of course, before I go any further, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to our channel because it really helps us out and I appreciate it. So this civilization was created 9,000 years ago. It's located in modern-day south-central Turkey. Back then, there were 8,000 people that lived together in one big town. What's interesting is that the civilization had no streets or roads. In order to travel around town, they actually traveled along people's roofs. Let me explain. So the houses were built right up against each other, and they had holes in the roofs and a ladder. So to enter the home, you would go into the hole and then climb down. To get around, you would walk along the roofs. Pretty fascinating if you ask me. In 5000 BC, this civilization was abandoned. We don't know why, but they think that climate change is a factor. It was discovered in 1958 by a man named James Mellart when excavating the area. Him and his team dug up the area for 4 years. In our 8th spot, we have the lost city of the Turquoise Mountain. The Minaret Gem is a 213 feet tall tower built around 1190. This structure is considered part of the lost city of the Turquoise Mountain. Around the minaret, they found pottery kiln, a Jewish cemetery, and other items suggesting a civilization was once present there. In fact, it's believed that people of different religions, including Christians, Muslims, and Jewish individuals, lived together there harmoniously for hundreds of years. Coming in at number 7, we have the Maya civilization. I got flashbacks to grade 10 history class while writing about this one. The earliest Maya settlements date back to around 800 BC. During the pre-classic period. The Maya had built thousands of cities around Central America. They built elaborate palaces and temples and other structures. They also excelled in art and mathematics and astronomy. Their peak as a society was around 250 AD to 900 AD, or the classic period. However, after that, their cities were abandoned. The big mystery is why? Well, there are a number of theories, from climate change to internal conflict to invasion or disease. But we still haven't got one solid answer. Now what's crazy is how big the Mayans' influence was on society. Moving on to number 6, we have Cahokia, aka America's Forgotten City. It was located in what is now Illinois. And back then it was considered North America's largest city. Its peak was during 1050 to 1200 CE. At that peak, they had a population of 10 to 20,000 people, and their city spanned over 6 square miles. It was first discovered in 1961. Archaeologists in the area unearthed some ceramic figurines. As they continued to dig, more and more was unearthed. Eventually, they discovered a small copper workshop. Inside, there was a fireplace with coals for the copper. It was also discovered that the city was deserted in 1350. For unknown reasons. Some possible theories are disease, flooding, deforestation, or overhunting. But again, like most of these civilizations on the list, we truly don't know. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the lost city of Petra. This city is located in the desert canyons and mountains of Jordan. It's believed that people started living there back in 9000 BC. Soon, it became a thriving city and trading center. It was filled with giant monuments and structures and tombs, all carved into the side of the cliffs. Nowadays, it's considered one of the new 7 wonders of the world. But it was determined that around the 7th and 8th centuries, the people of Petra began to abandon their city. It's thought that the changing of trade routes may have had something to do with this, whereas others believe they were forced to leave by a series of floods and earthquakes. The city lay untouched until the early 1800s. That's when an explorer dressed up like a local and snuck his way into the city, which was tightly guarded. Now it's a huge tourist destination. And in fact, some scenes from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade were filmed there. So that's a little fun fact. Moving on to number 4, we have Terra Preta. For years, Terra Preta, a civilization in the Amazon, was said to just be a myth. Back in the day, Spanish explorers wrote home talking about cities made from gold and civilizations in the Amazon. Of course, no one believed them. In 1541, an explorer went out on the search for El Dorado, the lost city of gold. Instead, he came across a civilization in the Amazon. He said that there were large villages and farms and cities. But years later, explorers went to the same spot he claimed this all was, and they found nothing. But now, satellite imagery has revealed that the jungle did once have large structures and an agricultural system. It's presumed that the civilization got wiped out by disease brought in by explorers. Or maybe they left because they found it way too challenging to live in the Amazon. Coming in at number 3, we have Indus Valley. Thousands of years ago, the Indus Valley used to be home to 5 million people. It was a huge civilization that stretched over 900 miles along the Indus River. It extended from modern-day northeast Afghanistan to Pakistan and northwest India. The civilization consisted of 2 large cities, Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. It had more than 100 towns and villages, but around 1800 BCE it began to decline for unknown reasons. It was rediscovered in 1856 when British officials were working on building a railway to connect cities. As they were working, they discovered fire-baked bricks. There were hundreds of thousands of these bricks. In 1920, their first major excavation took place, and that's when they discovered the Indus Valley civilization. It's thought that maybe changes in the rainfall patterns made it hard for them to grow food, so they had to relocate. But we still don't know for sure. In our second spot, we have Roanoke. It all started back in August of 1587. A group of 115 English settlers arrived on Roanoke Island. It was located off the coast, which is now considered Dare County, North Carolina. After a few months of living there, a man named John White, the governor of the colony, sailed back to England to gather more supplies. He left his wife and kids behind. But when he arrived in England, there was a huge naval war between England and Spain. His ship was seized by Queen Elizabeth. She took all available ships for this war. But this meant that John couldn't sail back to the island and to his family. 3 years later, he finally returned back. But the island was completely abandoned. There was no signs that anyone had ever been there. They just disappeared without a trace. The only clue lay carved into a tree. The tree had the name Croatoan carved into it, which was the name of an island that a tribe lived on. As a result, some believe that the inhabitants were killed or abducted by this tribe. But that's just a theory. Another theory is that they tried to sail back home to England and died along the way. And in our number 1 spot, we have Thonis Heraklion. This one is pretty much a real version of the lost city of Atlantis. So in the early 2000s, a group of divers found something fascinating off of the Egyptian coast. It was a face staring right back at them. Whoa. Not a real face. That would have given them nightmares. No, it was part of a statue. They continued searching and found more statues, ruins of temples, jewelry, coins, oil lamps, shrines, and a tomb. This is the lost civilization of Thonis Heraklion. Based on the artifacts, it was determined that the civilization was founded around 2,700 years ago. It was flooded or sank around 1,500 years ago. Apparently, the city was built around a big temple and was filled with a network of canals. But now it all lays underwater. How did this occur? Well, it's thought that they experienced a very disastrous flood, causing their buildings to collapse and soil to liquefy.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Olmec civilization. The Olmec civilization has often been referred to as the mother culture of Mesoamerica, and from somewhere between 1400 to 400 BC, the civilization rose in the Mexican Gulf Coast. The name Olmec came because they lived in the Olmen, the land of rubber. The Olmec civilization was thriving and advanced, and they too had their own mysterious stone structures known as the Olmec colossal heads. They even were able to successfully build aqueducts, which is an amazing feat for the time period. The civilization, however, started to see its decline around 400 BC. During this time, 2 of their major cities were just abandoned, which is very mysterious and of course super strange. They left behind everything, their buildings and structures, artifacts and statues. They just seemingly picked up and left. There isn't much left to go on, to be totally honest, but experts believe that some sort of natural disaster disaster might have been a cause for the disappearance. Something like a drought or an eruption could have wreaked havoc on their food supply. There was also the possibility of conflict between them and other civilizations in the area. At the end of the day, exactly what happened here remains quite a mystery, with only the remains of the civilization left to look at for clues. In our number 9 spot today, we have the ancestral Puebloans. This group, who were a culture of indigenous Americans, built their lives in what is now referred to as the Four Corners region of the United States. This area now consists of southeastern Utah, northeastern Arizona, northwestern New Mexico, and southwestern Colorado. This group was able to create beautiful stone homes into the side of cliffs during the 12th and 13th centuries. When I tell you that the level of skill and work this took was incredible, it really was. Some of these places would have hundreds of rooms, and they were the tallest buildings in the United States until the creation of skyscrapers in the late 1800s. That is absolutely wild. Unfortunately, these works of arts wouldn't be lived in for long, as the civilization met a rapid and violent decline. Many experts will point to religious and political conflict as a contributing factor to the decline of this civilization, but no one is totally clear. What we do know is that there have been discoveries in the area that point to violence, human consumption, water management problems exacerbated by a drought, just a lot of bad stuff that clearly shows the ending was an incredibly tough time for the people going through it. In the end, this all led to many of these people having to abandon their homes and flee south. While this settlement collapsed, it doesn't mean that the culture or the people were entirely gone. Many modern-day descendants of this civilization include the Hopi and the Zuni peoples. In our number 8 spot today, we have Cahokia. This settlement was established somewhere around 1,200 years ago, and it was a river valley community located near what is now St. Louis, Missouri in the United States. This is actually quite an incredible settlement because it was the largest north of Mexico at the time, with a population of around 20,000 people. The city had things like buildings, plazas, and one of the things that they were most known for was these massive mounds. The largest was known as the Monk's Mound, and it was 100 feet tall. The location of this settlement proved to be amazing for a while. Its spot near several rivers made it the perfect trading location. This was all great and ideal until it really wasn't. Experts believe that somewhere around 1200 AD, the population was wiped out by a massive flood that hit the area. Some wondered if the flood only contributed to an already dwindling civilization because they believed that perhaps resources in the area were quickly disappearing, or maybe they had been hit by disease. Others believed that the flood was the first massive event, but that perhaps it was followed by a little ice age that only sealed the fate. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Maya. The Maya are often referred to as one of the most advanced civilizations in our history. They carved huge stone cities in the jungles of South Mexico and Central America, and they weren't just plain and simple places. They were filled with plazas, palaces, pyramids, and temples. They created one of the most famous calendars. They had math and astronomy. This is all to say that this was one of the most thriving civilizations, and they reached their peak around 250 to 900 AD. Here's the thing though, nobody is entirely sure what happened after this. It is believed that it was most likely a combination of famine and drought, as well as the change the environment saw due to the deforestation that happened for farming. This all would have caused there to be a lot more civil unrest, and it's likely that neighboring cities would have turned on each other. We do know, however, that it took around 200 years for the civilization to disappear, so it wasn't just one single event, and it was quite a process, which is such a testament to how strong the Maya people were. While talking about this, it is very important for me to note that I'm talking about the downfall of the Maya civilization and not the downfall of the Maya as people. There are many people still alive with Maya ancestry who live all over our world. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Indus. The Indus became one of the world's earliest civilizations as they began to build their settlements some 8,000 years ago. They live in what is now India and Pakistan, and they expanded over great distances, 386,000 square miles, which is far more than other, more well-known civilizations of a similar time period. In fact, this group was thriving so much that they accounted for around an estimated 10% of the world's population at the time. The civilization was completely thriving until around 1900 BC, when things took a serious turn for the worst. They began to abandon cities and started to move southeast, and no one is entirely sure why. There was a leading theory that perhaps other groups of people from the north brought about their collapse, but that theory has since been put aside. At this point in time, more recent research is pointing towards a hiatus in the monsoon season that could have played a role in the downfall. When the monsoon season disappeared for essentially 2 centuries, this of course would make it nearly impossible for them to continue farming for food in the way that they had. Experts believe some other factors also played a role, such as natural disasters like earthquakes, or even the outbreak of some diseases like malaria or cholera. In our number 5 spot today we have Easter Island. Oh Easter Island. Many of us have heard of Easter Island before, whether it's because of the world famous stone statues or because of its incredible remoteness, but whatever the reason, let's take it back to the beginning. Sometime between 300 and 1200 AD, the Rapa Nui people found and settled the island. This is quite the feat already, considering the closest continental point to Easter Island is a point in central Chile that is 3,512 kilometers away. It's so remote, so the fact that they even found it is amazing, and then what they managed to complete is even more fascinating. Without advanced tools or even wheels, they managed to create the most famous moai statues, the largest of which stood 32 feet tall and weighed 82 tons. Of course, this means that these early people on the island were brilliant, hardworking, and super advanced, but something happened, and by the 1800s, the statues had toppled, the population of the island took a drastic downturn, and the leaders of the island were being overthrown. Experts have been able to get a pretty good idea of what happened in this instance though. Firstly, they took a look at charcoal fragments as well as pollen in the sediment, and they were able to determine that those living on the island had cut down almost all of the trees, and the rats on the island were eating the seeds of the trees before they had the ability to regerminate. This led to disaster completely. According to an article on history.com written by Jesse Greenspan, quote, "This ecological catastrophe, which eliminated the ability to make rope or seagoing canoes and reduced the populace to burning grass for fuel, may have then ushered in a period of mass starvation and civil war. The arrival of Europeans only added to the decimation, starting in 1722, when the first Europeans to set foot on Easter immediately shot to death several islanders. By the 1870s, several waves of smallpox, along with a major Peruvian slave raid, had reduced the number of natives to roughly 100. Now, Easter Island is a special territory, and it once again has a thriving population. As of 2017, the Chilean census registered that 7,750 people were living on this island, 45% of which considered themselves Rapa Nui. In our number 4 spot today, we have Göbekli Tepe. This is a pre-pottery Neolithic archaeological site that is located in Turkey. This site has been dated all the way back to somewhere from 9,500 to 8,000 BC, making it the world's oldest known megaliths, which truly is just incredible. This site is comprised of a bunch of large circular structures that are being supported by massive stone pillars, many of which are decorated with abstract, anthropomorphic details, and things which have provided very rare and very valuable insight into prehistoric religion and the iconography of the times when it was built. One of the most amazing things about this area is that it was first used at the beginning of the Neolithic period, which marks the oldest human settlements anywhere in the world. It has been called the world's first temple, and it was used by groups of nomadic hunter-gatherers from a wide area. Here's what makes this so remarkably interesting though. Despite what I said earlier, this place is not a settlement and instead was used by many people. The site was essentially built by Stone Age humans who came from about a 200-kilometer radius around the site. It isn't quite clear why they stopped using it, but what is clear is that without a doubt, this was one of the best archaeological finds our modern society has ever had, as it gives us just a glimpse into what life was like in prehistoric times, and it totally changes what we once thought about the timeline of our history. In our number 3 spot today, we have Catalhoyuk. Moving on over from Göbekli Tepe, we have this settlement that sits not too far away at all. Located in what is now Turkey, this settlement was thriving around 8,000 years ago and was known specifically for its engineering and architecture. One really cool thing about how this city was set up was, rather than traditional roads, the people who lived there got around by using the rooftops. I'd feel like I was in Assassin's Creed. That sounds so cool, but I guess for them it was just the most logical setup, especially considering all of the buildings were connected to one another. The people who lived here had a tradition of burying their past loved ones under the floors in their homes, as they did not have any sort of open burial space. In the end, it isn't quite clear exactly what happened to the residents of this ancient city, although there are of course theories. Because of the fact that this city didn't expand as widely as other civilizations seen in the area, many believe that perhaps disease came, spread, and rapidly declined the population. Archaeological work continues on the site, however, even today, to give us every insight possible into the lives of these ancient people. In our number 2 spot today we have Thonis. I've spoken about Thonis before because this place was super important to legend. Greek legend says that this was the city where Hercules took his first steps into Africa, as well as the place where Paris hid Helen before the Trojan War began, and for years, people thought it was just that. A place in the legends. That was until the early 2000s when it had its modern rediscovery. As it turns out, just over 2,000 years ago, either an earthquake, a tsunami, or a combination of the two hit the city and submerged it underwater. After 5 years of searching, archaeologist Frank Gaudio located the ruins of the city underwater as they had been submerged in the ocean. Since then, excavations and explorations of the ancient city have taken place, and it was stocked full of some incredibly cool treasures from thousands of years ago. In 2010, a type of ancient Nile riverboat was found here, and even just in August of 2021, it was announced that wicker baskets that contained fruits of the duum palm tree, as well as grape seeds that date back to the early 4th century BC, had been found among the ruins. And finally, in our number 1 spot today we have Skara Brae. This is an area that is located in Scotland, and it was found in an exceptionally surprising way. In 1850 there was a huge storm that hit Scotland, and it was so bad that around 200 people passed away from it. The next day, however, once the storm had passed, residents of the Orkney Isles began to notice that part of a cliff had dislodged, but it uncovered a sort of hidden settlement. Tests were able to date this site back from 3200 BC to 2200 BC, and it was shown to have been inhabited for about 600 years. There were round stone homes here, and the roofs were made out of whalebone and peat, and the design of this little city suggested that there wasn't a hierarchy, but rather a group of people living peacefully as farmers, herdsmen, and traders. While the site is small, the houses are in quite great shape for the amount of time it's been. This little settlement is Europe's most complete Neolithic village, and while it is older than Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids, it's been called the Scottish Pompeii because of how well preserved it is. No one is exactly sure why the residents of this village abandoned it, but it is likely that a change in climate is somewhat, if not fully, responsible, and a storm might have been the reason those living here had to leave in haste, which is deduced by how all of their belongings were left behind.